Welcome to this clinical walkthrough on a breach of professional boundaries case for UKMLA, brought to you by Med8, your 24/7 practice partner. Today, we're diving into a really complex and sensitive safeguarding scenario. Now, as you know, safeguarding is all about protecting a person's health and well-being, allowing them to live free from harm and abuse. This case, it demands top-notch communication skills and a really solid grasp of your professional duties. So we're going to break it all down into these 6 clear stages to give you a strong framework for your OSCE. Let's get started.
First things first, we need to set the scene. Getting this part right from the very beginning is absolutely essential for everything that follows.
All right, so here's the setup. You're an FY2 in a GP practice. A 35-year-old woman comes in with what seems like a pretty simple request on the surface. She wants a new counselor, but she's a bit vague about why. And that, right there, that's your first clue. Your real task here is to gently uncover and manage a very serious safeguarding issue, a potential breach of professional boundaries.
Your opening line is so important for setting the tone. This example is great because it combines a warm, professional greeting with a clear, permission-seeking question. It immediately starts to build rapport and creates a collaborative, non-judgmental space. It shows you're not just there to process a request, you're there to listen and offer support. Okay, let's move into what is probably the most delicate part of this station, encouraging the patient to actually tell you what's going on. This takes real patience and skill. So you start with a gentle, open-ended question like this one. It's not pushy, it just invites her to share at her own pace without feeling like she's being interrogated. You're simply opening the door, and it's so important that you listen carefully, not just to her words, but to the hesitations too. The moment you notice that hesitation, this is your key move. You have to actively build trust by telling her this is a safe and confidential space. This directly addresses any fear she might have and gives her the reassurance she needs to share something really difficult. And then, it happens. The pivotal moment. She discloses a relationship. Your reaction here is everything. You have to stay calm, keep your expression neutral, and just create an atmosphere that feels safe for her to say more. Honestly, your nonverbal cues here are just as important as anything you say next.
Now, the key here is to clarify what she means without sounding accusatory. You need to ask direct but sensitive questions to really understand the nature of this relationship. Things like, when you say a relationship, could you tell me if you mean a romantic or sexual one? And did this ever involve any physical contact? These questions are absolutely essential for gathering the facts you need to assess the risk properly.
Okay, so once you've got those initial facts, your focus has to immediately pivot to a thorough risk assessment. This is a totally non-negotiable step in any safeguarding case.
You've got to start by screening for red flags of abuse. You need to gently probe for things like coercion, control, or threats. Ask things like, did you feel pressured at all to enter into this relationship? Or did he ever ask you to keep this a secret? The answers are going to help you figure out just how severe this situation is. Remember, this might not just be an inappropriate relationship. It could be an abusive one.
Next, and this is just as important, you need to assess the direct impact on your patient. Don't forget, she was seeing this counselor for depression in the first place. You have to explore how this whole thing has affected her mental state, and you absolutely must ask about self-harm directly. It's a critical safety check you cannot miss. All right, so you've gathered the information. Now your response has to balance 2 really key elements: validating her experience and clearly explaining your professional obligations. You have to start with empathy and validation. A statement like this is incredibly powerful. It acknowledges her pain, it confirms that this is serious, and, most importantly, it removes any blame or shame she might be feeling. You are explicitly telling her, this was not your fault. It can also be really helpful to briefly explain this principle to the patient. Explaining what professional boundaries are helps put into context why this is so serious. You're clarifying that this isn't about her, but about a violation of a fundamental rule of safe healthcare, which is laid out clearly in the GMC's Good Medical Practice Guidelines. And this leads you right into explaining your duty. Be direct and clear. You have to report this, but frame it as a protective action, not a punitive one. You're doing this to ensure her safety and the safety of others. That transparency is key to keeping her trust. So let's build this all into a concrete plan of action. The patient needs to leave this consultation knowing exactly what the next steps are.
And just before we detail that plan, just remember, building the confidence to have these difficult conversations really only comes from practice. You can practice this exact case right now and get objective feedback on mymediate.com.
Okay, your management plan. It needs to be clear, decisive, and patient-centered. Let's walk through it. 1. Ensure her immediate safety by clearly advising her to stop all contact. 2. Address her ongoing needs. Arrange a new counselor and make sure you ask her if she has any preferences and schedule an urgent review with mental health services. And finally, you have to be open about your professional steps. Tell her you'll do a formal risk assessment and that you'll be discussing the case confidentially with a senior colleague to start the formal reporting process.
We're in the home stretch now. The final critical part of the consultation is making sure the patient has a really robust safety net in place after she leaves your room.
You have to be prepared for her concerns. A really common one is, I don't want him to get in trouble. It's so important to acknowledge her feelings, but gently and firmly restate your professional duty. Your response should be empathetic but unwavering. I understand that this is difficult, but my main responsibility is to ensure your safety and the safety of others. That's why I have a duty to report it.
And finally, your safety netting advice needs to be crystal clear. Book a follow-up appointment in a week or 2 to show that you're providing ongoing support. Give her written details for local mental health crisis helplines. And be explicit. If her mood gets worse, or if she has any thoughts of self-harm, she needs to come back immediately or get urgent help. You're building multiple layers of support for her.
Mastering this scenario is all about combining that genuine empathy with clear professional action. Remember, you can practice this exact case now on mymediate.com.